Okay guys, we're on Monday, day before the election, and I wanted to go through a few things, give my final thoughts on the electoral map and how it stands, and talk a little bit about the James Comey switch back to Hillary being just fine, everything's okay with her, and kind of the influence I think that may or may not have on the election. A few items I wanted to talk about. Right here you'll see on the Drudge report that he was reporting that President Obama had said that illegal aliens can come on in and vote and INS isn't going to come for you, and legally there's nothing they can do about it. Well, that was a report put out by Neil Cavuto, and the video was chopped up to make it look like Obama had said that, but that's not actually what happened. Let's take a look at the video, and here's what President Obama said, and here's what Gina Rodriguez from Jane the Virgin, the actress from Jane the Virgin, she was doing the interview for MITU, and here's what the president said in reality.
Many of the millennials, dreamers, undocumented citizens, and I call them citizens because they contribute to this country, are fearful of voting. So if I vote, will immigration know where I live? Will they come for my family and deport us?
Not true.
Okay.
And the reason is, first of all, when you vote, you are a citizen yourself, and there is not a situation where the voting rolls somehow are transferred over and people start investigating, etc. The sanctity of the vote is strictly confidential in terms of who you voted for. If you have a family member who maybe is undocumented, then you have an even greater reason to vote.
This has been a huge fear presented especially during this election.
And the reason that fear is promoted is because they don't want people voting. People are discouraged from voting, and part of what is important for Latino citizens is to make your voice heard, because you're not just speaking for yourself, you're speaking for family members, friends, classmates of yours in school,
entire community,
who may not have a voice, who can't legally vote.
Clearly from the video, Gina Rodriguez just asked a horrible question. She included in her question millennials, dreamers, and undocumented citizens. Millennials are just young people who are white, Latino, black, Mexican, Chinese, Asian, Muslim, Jewish, everything. So using the word millennial in the same sentence as dreamers and undocumented is a horrible skewing of the reality of immigrants who are here illegally versus U.S. citizens who probably have generations and generations of family who have lived here. So I thought President Obama did a good job of unpacking her question by simply insinuating that, yes, if you are a citizen and you have undocumented friends in this country, that it's your duty to go out and vote to help them. And all he means by that, clearly, is that he believes that Hillary Clinton will offer amnesty, that she'll try to come with some backdoor amnesty and try to allow these undocumented or illegal immigrants here illegally, allow them citizenship. Now, I don't agree with that in terms of policy, but in no way is President Obama saying that illegal immigrants or immigrants here illegally or undocumented should go out and vote. That's not what he's saying. And in fact, Gina Rodriguez went to Twitter, and here's her answer on Twitter about what she meant. Clearly, she was talking about herself. She's a U.S. citizen, and possibly admitting that she has some undocumented people living in her house with her, and she's a little worried. Wink, wink, I doubt she's worried about it, but wink, wink, she's a little worried that INS is going to show up at her door and deport everybody because she's a Hillary voter, which is sort of ridiculous. She asked a very inartful, horribly worded question, and it blew up in her face, and she can deal with that, but I don't think there's any underhanded stuff going on here. Let's talk about a few other things. Take a look at this Daily News cover. I think this is kind of funny and tragic at the same time. Mop secret. Over the weekend, it was reported that Hillary's maid was requested to print classified documents on a regular basis. So James Comey has come out and said everything's great. So apparently all of our maids can traffic in top secret classified information, and it's no big deal in this country. Another thing I wanted to talk about is rigged polls. I want you to take a look at this NBC poll. It's the NBC Wall Street Journal poll, and let's go through it. This is going to be a real quick thing because I'm not really all that excited about the idea that polls are being skewed towards Hillary through some grand conspiracy. I think pollsters do their best, and certainly there are pollsters who skew, and certainly there are pollsters who are political, liberal or conservative. But there was an NBC Wall Street Journal poll that came out a few days ago that kind of epitomized the perfect way to talk about polls. So let's check it out. So what we have going on here is a poll where it is 53-47 for the women. That's the exact breakdown of the United States. They did something interesting. So in this poll a month ago, Hillary was up by, I believe, 9 or 11. So there that is. And now she was up by 4 in the current NBC Wall Street Journal poll. But let's scan down a little bit and check out who they asked. So of course these were likely voters, but who did they end up polling by the time they were done with all of their likely voters? Well, look at the voters for Barack Obama here. He's at 50%, and the support for Romney from the people used in this current poll was at 35%. So that's a 15-point gap when in fact Obama beat Romney 51-47. So that's an 11-point surplus of devout Obama voters. Clearly those would be Hillary voters. So you end up with this 11-point skew, and Hillary only won the poll by 4 points. What do you think would have happened if they give you a 51-47 sampling that mirrored the 2012 election? The reality is this poll is either rigged or bad, and showing Hillary up by 4, which is where we're at today, and the poll is in the same spot, tells you that, yes, indeed, many polls are done poorly, and these are major media outlets doing a poll like that where it shows a 15-point gap. That's a complete skew towards Democrats, and there's no way Hillary would be up by 4 if they just did it legitimately. In fact, it would probably be Trump plus 5. Let's get back now to the real clear average politics of polls, and what I'm going to do right now is quickly go through some scenarios that I think are going to emerge tomorrow night when the story is finally told on how and why this election was won. So let's check that out right now. Okay, so this is the real clear politics average of polls, and what we're looking at is the ratings as they stand today. In the states where Hillary has a lead of more than 5 points, she has 203. To Trump's 164. But again, we want to go with no toss-ups. This is as good as we're going to get the day before the election. The polls as they stand the day before the election, if nothing changes, Hillary Clinton will win by 6 electoral votes, 272 to 266. But now let's give a path to Donald Trump, and let's make our argument for what could be the theme of tomorrow night's vote. And I think I've decided that what I'm going to go with is a theme where Donald Trump wins because Obamacare rates have skyrocketed in Pennsylvania, and Hillary wins because Donald Trump is a racist. So you'll know what that means by the states I'm selecting. So here we have it. 269 to 269 because Pennsylvania needs to be flipped out of Hillary's hands, and the way that's going to happen is because rates for Obamacare have gone up massively. In Arizona, over 100%, and in Pennsylvania, they're going up over 50%. And when elections happen, they happen for financial reasons. We have candidates that are fundamentally flawed, they're irredeemable, they're deplorable, they're whatever you want to say, but when people walk into a voting booth, they're going to vote with their pocketbooks. And the people of Pennsylvania have been handed a bill from Obama for a 56% increase on their health care. I think that's going to tip Pennsylvania to Trump. So Donald Trump has already said some horrific things about Latinos, and we're seeing it in the early vote in Nevada. There's been a report in Nevada that the surge of Latino voters that voted early are making it nearly impossible for Trump to overcome that lead that Clinton has on Election Day. Now, Arizona is super interesting. Very large Latino population, but also the largest increase for Obamacare rates, over $100. So I don't know if Hillary can flip it. But that's my point. This is the election. The election is Nevada, Arizona have to go to Hillary if she wants a chance in this election. And if Trump wants a chance, he needs to get Pennsylvania. Now, of course, either of them could end up with larger electoral vote wins. But that's not the argument I'm making. The argument that I'm making is that the theme for tomorrow night will be about Obamacare rate hikes and Donald Trump's racism towards Latinos. Now, what that presupposes is that Trump is going to get Florida and that he is going to get North Carolina. And we already have anecdotal evidence reported on Drudge that Trump is massively ahead of where Romney was 4 years ago. So I firmly believe that Trump is going to both win Florida and North Carolina. So this leaves a 269-269 tie. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, because I don't think Hillary can flip Arizona. But you know what? Most Democrats would say there's no chance for Trump to flip Pennsylvania. So if we're going to be fair about it, let's let them both flip a state, because someone's going to flip something, right? Somebody's got to flip a state. That's the only way for Trump to win. Hillary could not flip anything, and she would win if she just holds what she has today. But Trump has a ton of momentum. So what can Trump do to win? Well, right here in New Hampshire. The polls have been moving to Trump in New Hampshire for the last 2 weeks. The current poll, the most latest poll out, shows him up by 1.5%. Obviously well within the margin of error, but the reality is if Trump wins New Hampshire, he wins the election. That's what I'm going with. So I'm going to lay my cards on the table. I'm going to say that Trump actually gets well over 300 electoral votes, because I just see this momentum that he's had over the last week and a half as people, as Republicans, as never-Trumpers start to come home. And the argument that I made before, I mean it, I don't think that Hillary's going to win because she's had 30 years for people to get to know her. She is a national figure, and still she could never get over 47% consistently in any of the polls for a long period of time. I don't think people are going to walk into the election booth and suddenly decide, after knowing this woman for over 30 years, that yeah, I'm going to go ahead and decide today to vote for her. So I've always thought the undecideds were going to go for Trump. I'm going to hold on to that belief. James Comey might have skewed back a few of those undecideds towards Hillary, but in the long run, it's not going to be enough. I think Trump will ultimately end up winning either Michigan or Minnesota, and I think that'll put him closer to the goal. I think the 300 electoral votes comes when he gets Virginia and holds Arizona. I'll let Hillary have that. You can take away either Michigan or Minnesota, and he still ends up with over 300 electoral votes. And that's where I think this is headed. I think Trump will win, and I think he'll end up with over 313 electoral votes. There you have it. I want to talk a little bit about this James Comey thing. So initially when I saw this, I had just made a video, and I was going to post a video yesterday. I'd hoped to have it edited by yesterday. And I went through this video, made like a 10-minute video, and I was getting ready to start editing it, and I clicked on over to Drudge. And there was James Comey basically clearing Hillary again. And I knew what I had recorded had become obsolete in the last, 10 minutes. So I basically just junked that, and I said, you know what, I'm going to wait a day, because I did think there were going to be more news drops. And to my surprise, this morning, there were no more news drops. We're a day before the election, and there was nothing of note. I'm sure there's more WikiLeaks, but so far none of that's caught fire. So in the interim, in the last day, I had some time to think about what James Comey means. Him coming out again, what does that mean? Well, the markets are up 300 points, so clearly there's a belief that it moved the needle for Hillary. But I think it's 1 to 2% in both directions. So ultimately, I think it's a net zero-sum game, and I'll tell you what I'm thinking. So you have the never Trumps. So the people like Jonah Goldberg, Ben Shapiro, Brad Thor, Glenn Beck, in the news media. And then you have all the B-stars with 100,000 followers on Twitter who, are out there never Trumping, that whole group of people. They all have one thing in common besides being never Trumpers, and that is that they're all never Hillary. So they're not the Bushes who have come out and said that maybe they'll vote for Hillary. They're just never Trump, but they're also never Hillary. So they have a right to vote, A, B, they're political, and C, they love their country. So let me think this through. A, they hate Hillary. B, they're political, so they like to be involved in the game. And C, they love their country. And they just saw an FBI director yank us from the left to the right and back to the left again. And I think he pissed them off. And I have a little bit of anecdotal evidence on Twitter from these people. You can see them talking a lot about not what James Comey did, but about Hillary being a crook. And I've even seen some tweets where they're talking about Donald doing better in the last 10 days, about Trump doing better, not stepping on it, not, staying on script, staying off of Twitter, not being so abrasive. And that tells me that this Comey thing may have pushed another 1 or 2% of these never-Trumpers back towards Trump. The idea that Republicans will come home and they'll still vote for Trump while holding their nose because they really don't want Hillary to become president. So that's my belief on that side. On the other side, I do believe there are real people out there who actually can't make up their mind with all the information they've been given. They literally can't make up their mind yet. And they're going to walk into that booth and they're going to think about their kids and they're going to think about their loved ones and they're going to think about this country that they love. And they're going to think, I think they're going to think this: which one of these idiots will not fuck up the country the most? I really think that's what they're going to ask. So ultimately, this 1 to 2% of people who step into the voting booth still undecided, and they're going to look down at a name. One of them is going to say Trump and the other is going to say Hillary. And this stuff is going to come flashing through their head, and it's going to be, this guy says grab him by the cookie, and he's a racist. And he's not the kind of man I want to point my children to as a role model. But then they're going to look over at the Hillary name and they're going to say, God, that lady's so crooked. I mean, her entire life has been spent doing the most crooked things. Why is she always being investigated? And why is she always in the middle of trouble? Why are all of her friends being investigated? And so they've got to sit there and they've got to decipher between these two very imperfect, deplorable people. And they have to make a decision. And I do think, on balance, that maybe Director Comey waived maybe a 1% swing towards Hillary. So my belief is that the never-Trumpers are going to come home now. Maybe not all of them, but enough to kind of give Trump a bump because of what Comey did. And that the undecideds are going to skew a little bit towards Hillary. I mean, an ever so little bit towards Hillary, and that's going to give her a bump. And let me be clear about what I'm saying. I'm not saying Hillary's going to win the undecideds, because I think the undecideds were always going to be won by Trump. The reality of the incumbent is, if they can't get over 50%, they're not going to win the election. Now, this election has a couple of third-party candidates, so I think that is more, if they can't consistently get over 47%, then they're literally not going to win because they've had all this time to sell themselves. And Hillary is a much larger political figure. She's had 30 years to sell herself to the American people, and she literally can't close the deal. She can't close the deal. So that told me all along that this election was always going to be Trump's, and it was always going to be him winning. And the only thing that could cause him to lose was more of his boorishness, more of his talking, more of his calling Latinos murderers and drug dealers. That was always going to be how Trump lost. He was going to lose by turning people off. And he's done an outstanding job the last 10 days of keeping his mouth shut. Now, Latinos are over Trump. They're just not coming home. So yes, Nevada's a huge problem. That's true. I don't think Florida's a problem. There's some news out on Drudge right now. I checked before I started recording because I didn't want Drudge to ruin my tape again. So there's some reporting right now that in North Carolina and in Florida, Trump is vastly outperforming Romney. So he's behind in the states, which is typical for early voting, but he's behind on a much smaller portion. So I already think Florida and North Carolina are his. But getting to my final point, I've always considered this race actually Trump's to lose because Hillary, with 30 years of history, could not get over 47% in the majority of polls. She was always having trouble converting these undecided voters. And if you can't decide on someone you've known for 30 years, you're not going to walk into that booth and vote for them. Okay guys, that's going to do it for this day before the election update. I've made my thoughts known. If you want to make your thoughts known, please leave me a comment below. I'll definitely read into them and I'll start commenting on this as I do these videos. I'd like to see your comments last time. I promise you I will look up the definition of misogynist and make sure that I understand what the word means. I'm pretty sure I do, but some of the comments on my last video made it seem as though I didn't understand what a misogynist was. I promise you I do, because I was actively a misogynist myself for quite a few years during my youth. So all I can say about that is please leave your comments below. I am reading them and I'll start to comment on them more as I'm moving forward. But again, if you're into this nerdy talk, if you're into politics, please hit the subscribe button below and I'll keep this going. And we'll definitely have an update Wednesday morning. Take care, guys.